Thanks for sticking around. This is the second half of the Tools for Democracy session, which is essentially with the city's legislative body. So welcome the three members of the New York City Council Speaker's Office, and they're going to talk about hacking the council, building participatory and innovation inside of our municipal legislature.
Happy Women's History Month to all who identify as women today. Excuse the clickbaity name, we're struggling with what to do, but we are members of the Council's digital strategy team, and we're here to talk about the processes and adventures that we've had building participation and innovation into the inner workings of the council. This will differ and is connected to the session that just happened because I think we are going to focus a lot more on the processes and principles that we try to explore in government from the sort of inside, the other side of things. And so we hope you enjoy it. First, I wanted to introduce ourselves. We have Jazmin Chavez, our Deputy Director of Digital Strategy. I'm Joyce Li. I'm the Manager of Tech Projects and Partnerships at the Council. And this is Andy Cochran, who's our lead designer and developer at the Council, formerly of Open Plans. So our team is actually a young team at the Council. The Council, if you guys don't know, is the New York City Public Legislature. There are 51 council members across 51 districts of the 5 boroughs of New York City who represent about 150 to 200,000 constituents. The districts are redrawn every 10 years, and the council is in charge of the legislative, land use, and budgetary matters of the city. So we approve the city's budget, we approve ULURP proposals, we make the laws that govern the city. Up until 2014, the council did not have a tech and innovation team. And so our speaker, Ms. Martin-Garrido, when she took office, created a technology roadmap called Council 2.0 based off of the rules reform that she pushed through the legislative body earlier in that year. One of those sort of bullet points was establishing our team in order to figure out what kind of work to modernize the council needed to be undertaken instead of just sort of taking it from the council members and what was coming up in sort of different meetings. And so I helped write Council 2.0. It was a very interesting experience, but one of the biggest takeaways that we had was the speaker was really focused on thinking about people rather than innovation for innovation's sake, right? As government, we have a lot of folks who come to us with wonderful, wonderful proposals about different things that we can do and different areas that our work can go into, but we really wanted to focus a lot of our work on maximizing the impact on people's lives that we could make, right? So what does that look like? I think that we explored a lot of different things, and we distilled our work down to a few central tenets, which I'll go through with you now. One is, and coming off of this election, I know a lot of you probably also feel the same way, is that strong local civic participation is the backbone for which all other sort of democracy is most effective, right? And so we begin in our neighborhoods, we begin in our districts, and therefore we can weave a stronger city and a stronger country. Meeting people where they are. As a city council, as a body that is built off of people coming to us, coming to hearings, we're used to people we're used to operating off of that fact alone, right? We are an authority enough that people will just come to us in order to get the information they need and to make their voices known. We wanted to flip that a little bit in some of the work that we've been doing. We wanted to meet people where they are. This means in real life, IRL, in neighborhoods, but also on different platforms, and also thinking about the ways the products that we build would interact with the users that ultimately give us the mandate for our work. We've also explored the role of trust and information. Government bodies are not always predisposed to providing information, as I'm sure many of you know, and it can be a really uphill battle in terms of convincing folks internally that giving information to folks is actually what builds trust, right? That opening up your doors and your stores of data is what actually makes people understand that the work that you're doing and the fact that they should invest in that. The next one is a big one, and it's one of the reasons that we're here today. That product is very important, but so is process, right? A lot of the times, not just the process of us as a team in figuring out what the public needs are, but where those products fit into an empowerment process for our constituents, which will get into a little later. And of course, diverse engagement as more than an afterthought, right? I'm not the only person in the room to experience the fact that translation is always an afterthought, or building out for diverse communities, for people of different physical abilities, sometimes comes once the initial work is already done, which can be really sort of very exclusionary to a lot of different communities. So I'm going to launch in a second into our first adventure that we took, which was building a new home for the council. Our lead developer, Andy Cochran, will be taking us through it, and I'll kick it over by bringing up this fabulous picture of what the council's old website used to look like.
Hey everyone, I'm Andy Cochran. So I just want to talk to you guys quickly about our new website. First, I'd like to thank David Moore for earlier telling you guys to check it out. I'd like to reiterate that and say, check out our new website. It's thank you, David. So he also mentioned earlier Speaker Melissa Mark-Vitorito's Council 2.0 tech plan, and as part of that plan, she laid out the goal of creating a new website, we built what we called Council Labs, an experimental website as a way of testing out new ideas and new ways of sharing information with New Yorkers. And the council's old website, it was old. It was hard to use. It didn't work on mobile devices. So we really wanted to make something that was new. We had people internally wanted this. People externally wanted this. Council members were asking for it. The public nowadays, they expect you to have a modern website. So we really had a mandate to create this new website. So through 2016, we worked on with an iterative approach to building Council Labs. It's now the council's official website, and we'll continue to improve it in the future. It's built in a way that easily allows us to do so, to add new features and to change things and constantly evolve with the demands of the president. So, it's mobile-first design, so this will look great on your cell phone or any device that you view the site on. It's built with a responsive framework. If any of you guys are curious, it uses Foundation, which is I'm a big advocate of Foundation because they put accessibility first, and that was something that was really important in building this new website. We wanted to make sure that no matter what device or what assistive technologies that you're using, you're going to be able to access the information, and it's going to look good. You're going to have good access to it. So, and this for the speaker, this is not only important for the website. Whether it's neighborhood planning or online platforms, it's super important. Accessibility is super important to the speaker to make sure that inclusion and transparency is the new norm. Let's see. We worked a lot with the divisions of council, finance and land use and legislative division, and all their staff. And we talked to council members and their staff. We really wanted to work with them to give them the tools that they need to give information to the public. We're talking about people who are already overburdened, their capacity is limited. So we wanted to make sure that the tools that they're using will streamline their process and make sure that they'll be able to give you guys the information that you need. But we also advocated for our end user to make sure that the site is intuitive, to make sure that it's easy to understand the information that you're going to see on it. And at the forefront of this was demystification. Not a lot of people know what the council is or what we do. People don't know who their council member is. They don't know how they can get engaged. So we wanted to put that right up front. And one important way to do that is through the language we use and the tone that we set. And we want to make content easy to understand. So we've created content guidelines that will. So let's see. What am I trying to say? that will make things like make our language easy to understand. We want to use language in a way that makes it simple for even like machine translation to make it clear what we're trying to say. If we can't say it in a way that a machine can understand it, then maybe we're not saying it in a way that that people who maybe English isn't their first language, they might not be able to understand it. So we want to be very clear and concise in the language we're using. We're avoiding government jargon and legalese, and anywhere we would use something, we would try to tell you, like if we mention what a committee, we want to tell you what a committee is. So we want to be really clear in the language that we use. And of course, presentation matters. So we created a digital brand guidelines that puts the content first. We want to increase readability and create visual hierarchy and just have a level of consistency throughout all of our work. And in doing so, this really allows us to improve the quality of all of our content and engage residents in new ways. And now I'd like to welcome Jazmin to come up and talk to you a little bit about a specific piece of content. NYC she'll tell you more about what that is, but how our new site and our new tools were able to make that a little more accessible. Or, you going to talk about Joyce?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
No, it's fine. Both Jane it is. Who here is a land use enthusiast? All right, we have like a few people. Awesome. So that was one of the first tests. Andy helped lead the fight to build this new home for the council. And one of the first tests of the new site was the mandatory inclusionary housing and zoning for affordability and equality proposal that was before the council in early 2016. So if you don't know, I'm sure that you guys follow Mayor de Blasio's affordable housing plan. He sought changes to the New York City zoning law in order to create more affordable housing and made it mandatory for developers to devote a certain number of their apartments and units if they were over a certain FAR, which we can explain later. And one of the things before the council was figuring out how to put this online. So what you have in front of you is what we put online. It's some of the parceling and setbacks of ZQA. And the real lesson that we took away, the reason that we're talking about it today, and is an appeal that I'm also making in this community, is that it taught us as an innovation team how much we had to work with the council's other divisions, right? So we built this page and some of the digital strategy around the piece around with the council's land use division, who are not folks who are trained in innovation, who are not folks who are trained in technology. And we also had to work a lot with advocates who had a lot of questions about different parts of the proposal. Who here rides bicycles or takes public transit? Wonderful. That is not a large part of New York City. And so one of the biggest questions we had was, what about parking? It was something that we were getting phone calls about, we were getting emails, and really hit them on Twitter about. And so the website provided us with the first opportunity to sort of dispel some of those notions. Is that rocket science? I don't know. But I think for us, one of the tests of the new site was whether we could effectively convey this. And we realized that as innovators, we had to do it with the partnership of advocates, activists, and the folks who do the work, right? Something that I think a lot of folks who come from tech backgrounds like us don't always remember how to do. And so I think within the council, we had to create that institutional workflow that allowed that to be most impactful. As you can see, we also have some excerpts from our NYC campaign that went out, which Jazmin helped build. She does a lot of our social media and digital strategy campaigns. I'm going to bring her up for a second to talk a little bit more about that.
Good afternoon. So as part of what Joyce was saying, specifically with ZQA, one of the things that we wanted to focus on was that there was really long lines of people waiting to go and testify. I think we had over 400 people who came that day and were waiting. So we were there from 9 a.m. to almost about 10 p.m. that day. And for us, it was really important that everybody be heard. So what part of our work was to let people know that there was a number system, right? So people could go grab lunch, go run errands, and actually come back. So we would tweet out, now we're on number 24 through 36 or whatever it might be, so that people were very aware of how fast the testimony was moving along. And if somebody was like, I've had enough, I'm going home, they could still email their testimony to the council members as well. For the most part, I think everybody actually was heard. There's people who couldn't attend the hearing that did submit email testimony later to the council members and the committee themselves. But part of what we were able to show the other divisions is that digital and social works in the sense of being able to communicate back to people. There was an issue where some people couldn't get into the building for, I think they just couldn't articulate where they were going, and we were able to solve that security issue immediately. But just kind of letting them know that like the more open and accessible we are, the better we can also create digital tools to be able to meet the public and allow them to come in and be accessible and be a little bit more engaging. The second thing I wanted to talk about was our Budget Explorer. So if you go onto our website at council.nyc.gov, we created this Budget Explorer, which was probably, next to the website, the most challenging project that we've had to deal with in our division. Prior to this, the way that people read the New York City budget, which is a really complicated, one of the biggest budgets in the country, is that the mayor, or I guess the Office of Management and Budget, would release a 700-page document that was non-machine readable. And unless you knew exactly what you were looking for, you were not going to find what you needed. So our team and our data visualization wizard expert, Julia Fredenberg, was tasked with making the budget more visual and easier to understand and easier to digest. So what they did, well, and lucky for us last year, so OMB last year released a spreadsheet. And once they released a spreadsheet with all the information, we're like, voila, we can now build. And what they did, Andy and Julia, the brilliant minds behind it, got together and started brainstorming, like, well, what should this look like? What can this do? And how are we going to make this something that's mobile friendly, easy to digest, but still maintain the integrity of the budget with all the information? So they tested out, a few different features in terms of, do we visualize the entire budget in one large visualization? Do we do smaller visualizations in between? And what they created was actually a great marriage of both. Part of the challenges were that in the release of this document in this Excel or this spreadsheet is that there was a lot of code breaking that had to be done. There was a lot of codes for divisions and agencies that you wouldn't necessarily know that was the code for. So they spent a lot of time speaking with the different divisions of the council, speaking with different people in the mayor's office to really understand how is it that we were able to group where the money goes in New York City. Because that's what we wanted to show people is where does your money go, and have them be able to play around with it. The other thing is that even though when you go and explore the budget, it's a really big number. So sometimes, like if we were to take the admin, it's not two child services, like the Board of Corrections, if you looked at their budget and you break it apart, it might seem like a really large number, but when you break it down into percentage-wise, that it might be only like 0.01% of the total budget. It really makes a difference in terms of how it is that you're going to like advocate on behalf of your cause, your organizations, or how it is that you also want to engage with your council member when you bring this up in terms of the future budget hearings, which have also just begun, by the way. Some of the other challenges as well is how do you take this really complex information and distill it down to the most important? And what they also did is that they only worked with open, publicly available data. And the reason for that is that they wanted to also test or create something that everybody else has to work with, so that we could also see what are the limitations that people are going to encounter when using this public API to create their own tools as well. The third thing that went with the Budget Explorer is that we actually created digital content around understanding the New York City budget, because people don't understand that the New York City budget doesn't just begin and end in May through June. Budget hearings already started this last Thursday, the preliminary budget hearings. There's a proposed budget that comes out first from the mayor. So we created short 30-second videos that explained every section of the New York City budget in a way that people could understand. And now actually this next week we roll out a digital campaign to get people to come to the hearings and provide testimony as well. So we're testing out different features, but this is probably one of the most important things that people want to know from the city. And so we're looking at ways of how do we continue to make it more accessible, and then as we work with the next set of the budget this year, how do we make it bigger, how do we make it better? bringing Joyce up again.
Just a quick note on this. This is an open source project. You can see the GitHub link down at the bottom. Check it out. Literally, check it out.
Really got it? Here's the operating budget for the Conflict of Interest Board of New York City. Thanks to everyone who thought that was funny. So we're going to move on to the second part of our presentation, which is a part that's very near and dear to my heart, and something that has taken a lot of capacity at the council, but is something that the speaker and the members are very, very dedicated to, which is building out a new democratic process. And that would be, well, the logo didn't show up, but it would be participatory budgeting. Yay! Woo! Basically, our idea of bringing at least the capital budget back to the people. A short rundown for folks who don't know, participatory budgeting is a democratic process in New York City that was started in 2013 by 4 members of the City Council, including Speaker Mark Garrido, who's a founding member. It was very, very small, and we were collected votes in tiny boxes, and it was, but since then, the process has expanded to, this year, 31 members, all 5 boroughs now, including Staten Island, which we're very, very excited about. But basically, residents join into different groups and propose projects they want to dedicate city funding to. And then every March to April, PB is about 3 weeks away for those of you who are interested, people vote on the projects that they want most in their community. It's a watershed moment for a lot of people because I think it lexicalizes the idea of government, but not around the idea of an individual or person. So rather than submitting your vote for Joe Schmo or Miranda, whatever, you're thinking about what you want in your community, right? You're thinking about that capacity, you're thinking about your playground, your crosswalk, your basketball court, and that in turn makes the actions of government from the bottom up very clear, not necessarily in terms of a human being. So we find that very, very interesting, and the council members are very invested in it. In terms of PB by the numbers, last year, over 51,000 people voted in the last cycle. Of these, nearly 60% of those folks identified as people of color, 63% identified as women, 30% reported an income of or below $25,000 a year, and more than 25% of those folks were born outside of the United States. This is huge for us. We understand, and as I'm sure many of you do, how many folks are being excluded from both the democratic process and the public conversation in the current political climate. And the idea of building out a process that is open to all folks, regardless of immigration status, and also to young people, because I think that we often don't empower the folks who are teenagers who are 12, 13, 14 years old in our community to help make those civic decisions. It is a big deal for us. So what does that mean the process looks like? It means a little grassroots, right? Talking to folks who are both organizers and innovators, I think this is very familiar to you. It is a modern process in a different way. It is a lot of newsprint, a lot of rec centers, a lot of paper ballots and pencils, and multiple district offices collecting outdated Excel spreadsheets with different versions. So I think in terms of our team, we've tried to think about really intentional ways to modernize this process. And so we've done a few things, and I think that it's brought forth a lot of ideas about the role that innovation can play in the democratic process. The first thing we did, Andy Cochran and Open Plans helped build out this ShareBox map in 2014. It allowed different people in different neighborhoods to submit ideas during the idea collection process. So you could literally, go on to ideas.ppnyc.org and drop a pin about something that you see in your neighborhood. There are different categories. You can do schools and education. If you see a senior center that has, say, like a broken, or a broken sidewalk or something like that, you can do that, and it's tracked, and we collect it, and we analyze it, right? This map brought up a lot of different questions at the council because it was lauded across the board. People love the idea of it being so easy to submit an idea. However, we noticed that the parts where ideas were submitted most and the neighborhoods where the map was most popular were places where internet access and income were highest, right? So in the lowest income neighborhoods, ideas were low, even if those areas had a council member who was deeply involved and very, very, involved in the community in PB, right? So that was a gap that we thought a lot about because the advent of this map meant that a lot of folks came and approached us and said, why don't you guys just move digital voting online? That would be great. Then we can all just log on and vote. We wouldn't have to leave our homes. And that was something that we've actually held off on until this year, which I can get into in a second, particularly because we saw that the feedback was so sort of stratified across racial and class lines. So that was sort of one takeaway we had from this. So the next step we had was, okay, well, let's make voting at the site easier so that you're not, shuffling with all these paper ballots. This is our fearless leader, Speaker Melissa Margarito, testing out a vote site at La Marqueta, which is a rehabilitated space in East Harlem where our district is. It's the site of Hot Bread Kitchen and a few other sort of small business incubators that the administration has helped us rehabilitate and turn into a really cool, all ages, small business sort of showcase for folks. And as you can see, Melissa is voting on a Microsoft Surface, generously lent to us by the Microsoft Civic technology team. And it was the first, I think a lot of the districts came back to us with feedback about how managing the paper ballots was really hard. I think that opening up digital vote sites enables us to do machine translation in a way that is very slick and allows for user access and ease of use. So that's something that we're really proud to be doing. We're obviously always still working out kinks, but those will be available at your PV vote site this year. On to digital voting. So that is a decision, sort of taking away from all this, that we finally made. I think in the past 4 years, we feel like we've built PB out as a democratic process whose foundation is strong enough that we can now bring voting online. So this year, if you live in a PB district, one of 31, you'll be able to log on and verify yourself online and then vote without having to leave your home. Well, it's been a long journey towards this because we wanted to make sure that all the folks who are usually suppressed in those processes were right there with us, right? And that was something that we were really glad to do. So as an addendum to that, we also have started doing text messaging for a lot of our campaigns. So this on this side of the, I'm really terrible with left and right, is our Get Out the Vote text from PB 2016. Folks are able to get vote sites delivered right to their phones. And we've also started to do texting from the city council so that folks can get updates from us. We debuted this last month. So this is very, very, very new for us. We texted about Melissa's State of the City on February 16th, as well as some of her statements about the recent administration's actions. And so we would love to talk about some of the takeaways we want. First of all, I think one of the things we've learned is that people want access to better information. And I should say, these are lessons that I think we've learned as an institution, not necessarily things that we've learned as individuals, but I think learning as a team at the council, showing the council itself as an institution that people want access to better information is a big deal, right? Because I think sometimes the idea that information can be hurtful or can inspire lots of chaos is something that people, not just across government, but in any sort of position of power, tend to think. So the more that you withhold, the more control that you have. But we've actually learned the opposite, right? That giving people access actually affords you greater control because it affords you greater dialogue. I want Jazmin to come up here and talk a little bit about access to better information and the positive interaction that it can do.
Sorry. No, you're fine. So just really quickly, I know we're wrapping up. The thing with access to information and positive interaction is in government we're a lot of times scared of being able to engage via social. And even now, I read and I see and we see everything that is sent to the council, good or bad, whether you tweet us a picture of your butt or tweet us something about PB. We see it and we do take it into consideration and we do actually filter that information back up to the people that it has to go to. So what we're learning is that you can have a positive interaction when we engage back with people via social, and it's okay to engage. And then the other thing is, we know that we're working in a world where Snapchat is basically the way we're going. So how do we, as the council, then learn to create really easy, digestible information that people can understand in 8 seconds, in 10 seconds, Whereas before you could create a 1 minute, 2 minute video and you're like, oh, it's so short, it's so great. We're living in a world where you're not gonna watch past the 8 to 10 second mark, and all of analytics and everything else is showing us that. So one of the things that we'll focus on as well is making sure that we're also creating that short micro content that's easy to share, easy to understand, and easier for you to be able to just get it out there. Thanks. And one more.
Yeah, so I wanted to keep going with these takeaways. We learned that language and tone matter. This matters most when we're talking to the council offices. A lot of times, we're a short, glib generation, and we're also very idiomatic, which makes it really problematic as someone who's worked on both sides of the sort of multilingual translation barrier, it's really hard to translate that text, right? If you're constantly talking in idioms. And so that's something that we tried to really move through from a sort of like website design entry point rather than sort of putting it through on the council as a whole policy. But we've used the website and the idea of design ideology to force through an idea about equity in language at the council. Because I think that's something that's very lost when we're not thinking about how many people rely on machine translation in order to get basic information about their civic rights, right? So that's something that we've thought about. And we've also realized that that detailed information, just like with MIHCQA, doesn't need to be complex, right? You don't need to use jargon in order to get your idea across, which is something I'm sure many of you guys also know. The thing that we return to most is innovation without intention and tech for tech's sake can very adversely impact marginalized communities. I think that in a lot of the conversations we've had with folks, we've had to really preserve this sacred space where we think about what the impact on users in New York City's most marginalized communities is first, rather than thinking about, as you guys see with the sharing economy and many other places in the tech space, thinking about convenience or cutting the A to B line shorter, right? So that's something that we are always keeping in mind. And of course, we should say, and we are here on behalf of the speaker, vision leadership should come from the top. I say that to you guys as advocates, as organizers, as innovators today, and that is to put pressure on your leaders to create teams filled with people like yourselves, right? To do the work and push it forward. Because in government, with all the work that people have in front of them, it is really hard to sort of create that space just from a lateral point, right? That vision and leadership must be as much bottom up as it is top down. And so I make that appeal to you all today. And thank you very much. Wait, before you guys leave, I want to say, we want your ideas. So we set up a text line for just you guys, your own very text line today, to share your ideas with us. So if you text SOD to 917-746-5837, you'll get into a messaging tree where you can tell us what was great, what was bad, and what you'd like to see from the New York City Council. So thank you very much, and happy International Data Day.